another reason what led me to the COO Alliance is being in a group with like-minded people that are just trying to get better at what they're doing. And there's a commitment to not only yourself, but your peers within those groups as well to support them and help them. And that's where the servant heart, the servant leadership. For me, I fill my bucket not only getting some valuable information that I can use to help propel my business forward, but I'm also being a resource to others to be able to help them as well.
All right, we've got a good episode today. Our guest is Southeastern Tank's Director of Operations and Custom Pump and Controls Senior Manager, Stephen Whitehouse. Stephen's also a COO Alliance member, and he's going to talk about his experience in the industry, running a business as a servant leader, managing multiple businesses as this kind of director of operations, how he's worked with entrepreneurs who definitely have this kind of squirrel style of leadership where they're coming up with lots of great new ideas and systems and projects and kind of dumping them on our plates. He's going to talk about going through some acquisitions, dealing with imposter syndrome, how acquisitions are often much harder to do than startups even are. And he's going to talk about just his mindset and approach to running companies. You'll enjoy the episode. We'll see you on the inside. You can also watch all of our episodes on our Second in Command podcast YouTube channel. So Stephen, welcome to the Second in Command podcast.
Cam, thank you for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to learning from you. I'm also glad to have another COO Alliance member on the podcast. So before we dive in, I want to talk about two quick things. First is I want you to tell us a little bit about Southeastern Tank, which is the main company that you are in this Director of Operations, Second in Command role for. And then secondly, I want to talk about how you connected with the COO Alliance and what was it that was, in your career trajectory that had you reach out and look to join.
So Southeastern Tank is a niche construction company. We build elevated water storage tanks all over the Southeast, hence the name. But a family-owned company, been around for almost 50 years. It's second generation owned. I work for Dustin Dowdy, who's now the president and CEO. And Southeastern Tank was actually a customer of mine in my previous role. I worked in corporate America and just in the construction industry as a whole. And I built some rapport with the president of Southeastern Tank through my nonprofit. And ultimately, he started recruiting me to come. And honestly, it's been great ever since. And kind of what was the catalyst of me coming on board was the fact that he wanted to grow and scale his business. He'd kind of been in this same spot for years. And he was kind of bringing it, taking over from when his dad left the company. And he said, hey, I need somebody to help me scale this thing and take us into our next deep blue horizon, right? So I was all in at that point, and it's been, an exciting 2.5 years since I've been in this role. Becoming the COO, the second in command here, was it happened very organically, ultimately, because I was hired in as a operations manager at first to just kind of, hey, let's manage this construction business. But in 2022, we actually started up a company and we acquired a company all at the same time. So my role expanded 3 times and overseeing 3 different businesses. So that's when I assumed the director of operations for the 2 companies, Southeastern Tank and Solutions by SCT. And then also acting as a managing partner of Custom Pumping Controls in Florida, where I also take care of the operations responsibilities. So getting to the COO Alliance and how I kind of ran across you, I found myself, I woke up one day, I'm running 3 different businesses, $25 million. Like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, right? So I immediately started to, hey, I like reading. I like listening to books whenever I'm traveling. I've read a couple of your books in the past, and I actually saw where The Second Command, that was a book that I didn't have as part of my library. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to listen to this. And I listened to it. I drove to Knoxville, Tennessee, and drove back, and I listened to your book, and it made a lot of references to the COO Alliance within that. And I was like, man, I need to be a part of this community because it sounds like there's a lot of people just like me that are working hard, but they just don't have all the answers. So I've been very blessed to be a part of the COO Alliance to this point and started to bridge a lot of gaps that maybe I had and helping others do the same.
Well, you know what? Thank you. One of the things you mentioned along there, I call imposter syndrome. And it was that, all of a sudden you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm running these 3 companies. I don't know what I'm doing. I think that every second in command, every COO, at some point in our careers, we feel that. What do you think you do to start to shed that imposter syndrome? What have you done personally, or how have you kind of worked through that to gain some confidence that, maybe you don't know everything, but you know enough and you're still learning, or that you feel okay with the fact that you're still learning while you're doing it?
I think everybody from CEO to the bottom, everybody feels that. And every day you feel it at some point. It's always this doubt that creeps in inside of you. And I think knowing that others feel the same way has obviously helped me kind of shed that. It's like, hey, not everybody knows what's going on at all times. And one thing that I always keep in mind is like, don't let perfection get in the way of progress. You're not going to be expert sensei level at everything that you're ever going to do, but just show up every day and just get a little bit better. And that's ultimately my mantra, whether if it's in life and in business, my health. I'm not going to be the best, but damn it, I'm going to try and I'm going to get a little bit better each and every day. And ultimately that confidence just starts to grow and grow as you focus on that. 1% better is the mantra, and that's the goal each and every day.
It's interesting you talk about the perfection. I find that sometimes perfectionists are actually detrimental to growth. Perfection really leads to procrastination and delaying things. Have you had to work through that, or have you just never been a perfectionist?
I definitely have had to work through that. As I look back at my career, and I do some things ad hoc, like I'm a real estate investor on the side as well. And I may have not had all the tools, but man, I want this to be perfect. So I've passed up on deals that I just kicked myself over, right? Think about that. And again, throughout my career, there's been these moments where there were opportunities. I'm just, hey, I'm not ready for that because I don't know it all and I haven't, and rather than jumping just both feet in and saying, hey, I don't know it, but I'm going to figure it out. And since I've started doing that more, it's crazy how these opportunities, they tend to work themselves out, especially if you show up, you put in the work. The last probably 8 years of my life, when I got into my 30s, that's when I really started to kick that into overdrive, and it's paid off big time.
I'm curious about the acquisition part. You said that one of the things that you guys did during your time there was acquired another company. Any lessons from that acquisition? Any lessons from kind of during the acquisition and then post-acquisition / integration period?
I've read a lot of books, and everybody says buy a business first before doing a startup. But I will tell you that the startup was 1,000 times easier than the acquisition was. And here's why ultimately, when you already have a culture in play and you're doing a startup, it's easy to bring people on and, hey, this is the way we do things, this is the environment, this is the culture, this is the way that things are done. Well, the company that we acquired, great company, and they had their own culture, right? They had their own way that they did things. So trying to reverse some habits and reverse some, I would say, legacy issues and things that were going on, it's something that we still strive and still work at today, right? And part of that is getting rid of people that ultimately don't want to buy into that new culture and that new atmosphere that you're trying to cultivate. Great people all the same. And if they don't want to be a part of that, that's great. That's their prerogative. But we've upgraded in a lot of roles because of that. We got people that actually are bought in. That has ultimately been the toughest part of the acquisition, is taking a culture that was established for 30 plus years, a business very similar to what Southeastern Tank, family owned. You had people that have been around for 10, 15, 20 years, and ultimately getting things ran the way you want it to be ran versus the way that they used to do things.
What do you think made the acquisition successful? What did you do to kind of vend in the new acquisition?
Ultimately, a lot of grit and hard work and showing up. There were days I wanted to, throw my hands up. I'm going back to Tennessee. This is tough. But again, keep showing up. I'm a big believer in leading with empathy and investing in our folks. And I think once we won over several people that were part of that legacy group. And once they realize, hey, we're here to make your life better. We're here to, grow this company. And we want to do this organically too. We want to take people in their current role and grow them throughout their careers, right? That's where I feel like my strength is taking you from here to there. And we really have turned around that ultimately as a whole, is getting people to buy into, hey, where we're at is this ain't the last stop. We're going even further from a revenue standpoint, from a company size standpoint, and you're our leader for tomorrow. And that's definitely helped for sure with a lot of those folks.
What about on the mistake side of things? What do you think you did wrong with the integrations?
One thing we wanted to do, Cam, is bring in a lot of different new products and new shiny bells and whistles. And I think we tried to do too much at once with that, instead of focusing on the core business and getting just very granular and very good at that. We wanted to bring in a lot of different other things, and everything became important, right? You got 10 things that are important now instead of focusing on the meat and potatoes of that business. And ultimately, I would say it blinded us, it distracted us. And then in hindsight, if you talk to the CEO and our executive group, we would all agree it's like, hey, we tried to do too much at once. So it's like get really good at your core business before you expand, would be the takeaway from that.
That makes a lot of sense for sure. I think people tend to kind of expand and they think it's going to be so easy, right? How about with the actual team? Was there anything that you had to do in the acquisition with your core team? Did you tell everyone you were working on? Did you only bring a few people into the fold?
Yeah, so this was, everything that we do is within the water industry. So a lot of the key players and things we already have a working knowledge of, but there were a lot of subject matter experts that have been doing this for 20, 30 years that are part of that team. So again, to try to increase that buy-in, whenever it came to initiatives and things that we wanted to do within the company, we started bringing some of those key stakeholders in that had been with the company for a whole time. So think seasoned sales reps that have been doing it for 20, 30 years. Think, controller, accountant that's been in the business for 20 years, right? So versus just immediately ripping the band-aid, hey, this is the way that's going to be done. Some of the processes and systems and new things that we brought to the company, we definitely wanted to get some buy-in and some input from those people because they obviously have a better working knowledge and more
Mm.
subject matter experts in that industry than what we were.
I want to go back to the starting point for you then. You came into the company right in the midst of COVID. What were you thinking making a change at that time? What was it that was attractive about the company that had you join them at that time?
Well, as I mentioned before, I kind of came from corporate America and was very successful. I'd worked for several Fortune 500 and even Fortune 50 companies. Ultimately, in corporate America through COVID, there was a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of things that changed in that space. And again, that's folks' companies and that's their prerogative. But I saw an opportunity to make where I was making $15 million, $20 million for a $10 billion company, I could come in and help a $10 million company get to $20 million. I could help a $20 million company get to $50 million. And having that kind of that macro impact on something smaller was what
Mm.
really attracted me and where I was at with my career is I wanted to make a bigger impact on a smaller vessel ultimately and take it to the next level.
Was there any culture shock for you coming from the Fortune 500 world into more of a family-run company?
The first, I was super bored when I first came in, and I only had the one business. I had 15 employees. It was kind of a culture shock. It was like, okay. And again, I took for granted maybe a lot of the nice things that I had in corporate America, some of the tools and resources, IT. Well, I stepped into this role. I was the new IT guy. I'm like, hell, I don't know the first thing about IT. That was kind of tough, but at the same time, the culture that has been cultivated here at Southeastern Tank, and specifically by Dustin since he's taken over, I mean, it's second to none. They do stuff, we do stuff for our employees that most corporations wouldn't even dream of doing for their employees. Again, there were some things that were like, man, that would be nice to have, but it was cool on this other side. I work for one person, I answer to one person, and he lets me run his business as if it were my own. And there are a few checks and balances, obviously. I'm not out here just selling the family cow, but at the end of the day, he trusts me in my decision making. And that's something that I'm blessed and I'm happy to be a part of.
I mean, I think the boredom part when you're starting or not quite sure what you're going to be taking on, does it lead to taking on too many parts of the business that you shouldn't have? And how do you decide what to say yes to and what to say no to?
Yeah, that especially the first 6 months, first year, Cam, that I was a part of the corporation or the organization here, is there were things and wants and needs that I had in my mind that I had at other places that I felt that we need to put in place. And in reality, it that ultimately started taking up a lot of my time. It was trying to plug in a lot of these things that we didn't have. Now there was some really good stuff, performance evaluations. That was something very simple that the company had never done here at Southeastern Tank in the entire 40 plus years of existence. And we plugged that in and the feedback was great. But there were other things that we plugged in that weren't so great. Managed IT services that we weren't quite ready for and different things like that. But it's obviously been a roller coaster. And that's something that I'm trying to get a little bit better at. A COO is the things that I can indulge all the time into. And because I'm a people pleaser, I want to make you happy. I want to take care of everybody. I have that servant heart, that servant leadership, and it gets me in a lot of trouble and it occupies a lot of time, especially at home with my wife. So that's something that I'm constantly working on, and I'm definitely getting better at. Having a virtual assistant to be able to delegate things to has helped tremendously in that space. I don't have to say no to it, but I can delegate that to somebody that's very capable of taking care of those things.
I think the people pleaser is something that every company should try to hire for, right? It's the people that are going to say yes, they're going to take on projects, they're going to work harder, they're going to try to do their best work, they're going to live core values. That's all good stuff, but it can also lead to burnout. Are there any things that you do as a COO or as a second in command to avoid getting sucked into the minutia and avoid taking on too much? Maybe you're not getting into the minutia, but you're really operating as a director of ops now for 3 companies that are all related. How do you push back to protect yourself from getting burned out?
Before I had a BA, I was very much at my boiling point and almost at that burnout phase because, again, I want to take care of people. I want stuff to be fixed and be working properly. And prioritizing is obviously a big part of that. You can't take on 20 projects at once. It's just impossible because you'll never get any of those projects done. My thing now is yes, but not right now. And setting clear
Mm.
expectations of when I expect to be able to get some of these things done, or if it's pushing stuff out for Q2, Q3, Q4. I'm doing a lot better at prioritizing and delegation. Those are big parts of it. And then again, just trying to focus on the core business and not so much on all these other great things that I get pinged with by 50 emails a day from folks trying to sell it and sell these cool things that can help you be more optimized and efficient within your business. I'm saying no to those things a lot more than what I used to as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely saying no to those things. It's the ones that I'm kind of taking on the projects internally. It's where the business is, we need to do this, or even you having ideas and saying we could integrate this, we could tie in that, we could work with the supplier. There's an unlimited amount of ideas and things that we could be focusing on. Do you think the pleaser gets in your way there, or do you think you found a way to balance that out?
Yeah, I definitely think I've found a way to balance that out. When I was first in this role, no, not at all. And it was something that I was constantly juggling project to project. I fall flat on my face with these whenever 3 months down the road and nothing's accomplished and nothing's finished, right? Being a high achiever, I want to get stuff from cradle to grave. I don't want to leave stuff lingering and hanging out there. So it's something I'm definitely a lot better with now. And again, it just gets down to saying those two magic letters. That's NO, and it's tough,
It's
and sometimes I don't want to, but it's improving.
within a family-owned company. Is it just the son who's running the business now, or are there more family people working in the business?
Yes, there are other partners. So we have a controller that she had worked for the company since she was 18. And when the president's father passed away, he gifted her with some equity in the company. There are also 2 other siblings, but Dustin is kind of leading the charge from a front. The sister, she does her own thing. She's an accountant. And then the other brother, he's a project manager for us that works remotely from Oregon. So, but it's mainly Dustin kind of calling the shots.
So they have some equity, but they're not there in the day-to-day on the leadership team. You're not having to manage around the family kind of political issues, is what I was curious about.
Yes, sir. That's correct. They kind of keep that stuff hidden behind the curtain if there is any,
Yeah.
which I'm thankful for. It doesn't get muddy or messy. And I think they truly trust the CEO, President Dustin, with a lot of our decisions because he's done such a great job at taking the company when his father passed away to where it is now. And again, we're kind of bigger, better, faster, stronger every day and got some exciting stuff on the horizon.
What about your skills? What have you been working on for yourself to scale as a leader? Are there any specific areas over the last few years that you've really worked hard on?
First and foremost is stepping into this role, trying to stay out of the weeds is a big part. I'm a big believer in self-development and personal development. You can't go to a company and expect them to just hand, oh, here's your development plan. You got to take it upon yourself to focus on the things. So I'm a big believer in reading and participating in seminars and things, masterminds like the COO Alliance. This is something that I'm very excited about because I've sat in other masterminds and other aspects of my life from parenting and being a father, and I know how much value I got out of that experience. And that's ultimately another reason what led me to the COO Alliance is being in a group with like-minded people that are just trying to get better at what they're doing. And there's a commitment to not only yourself but your peers within those groups as well to support them and help them. And that's where the servant heart, the servant leadership for me, I fill my bucket not only getting some valuable information that I can use to help propel my business forward, but I'm also being a resource to others to be able to help them as well.
I'm curious what your thoughts are around vulnerability as a leader. You talk about the servant heart, where we're showing up to help others and really help growing our people, growing their confidence, growing their skills, really kind of keeping our eye and helping to move them along in their careers. How about the vulnerability component, where our leaders are supposed to be more of an open book and show where we're struggling? What are your thoughts around that, and how do you show up kind of as that open, vulnerable leader?
I've kind of lived in two camps there, Cam. Is in the past, I had kind of a rough childhood, rough upbringing, and I was like, nobody cares. Work harder, forget about it. I don't have time to have a pity party or feel sorry for myself or even talk to you about what's going on. I'm just going to grit it and run through it. And as I've matured and as I've gotten older, I have found that being more vulnerable has helped me in my relationships with not only my peers and folks within my executive team, but also establishing an understanding with my employees, my second level managers, and even folks under that. It makes you appear human, and you're not just, oh, that's the COO or CEO. At the end of the day, we're all people and we're all struggling in a certain way. And the more vulnerable you can be with your team, that's just such an incredible dynamic that a lot of people don't tap into, I believe. But when you do, and you can showcase that, and it creates that streak goes both ways ultimately. It really does empower your team and makes you stronger as a whole.
Yeah, the vulnerability builds trust really quickly, right? The more open and vulnerable we are, the more trust we build. And I think it's something, especially when you show up and match that with the servant heart leadership style that you focus on for sure. Talk about your day to day, and what do you do to balance your time right now? Because you've got all these different pulls with the different businesses you're the second in command of. How do you manage your time? How do you manage your priorities? Do you have any specific systems that you use?
Yeah, so I do a couple of things. One, I'm a time block fanatic, right? I said, like most people, I have calls and things that litter my day. But if I have an hour and a half, 2 hours here, when I have gaps, that time is getting committed, and I'm time blocking that time off to dedicate it to a project or dedicate it to a certain bucket of a business, whether it's safety for this company. So time blocking is a big part of my planning process. I prioritize my health first and foremost. Every morning, work out, get that done, get that out of the way, eat the frog. And then I play dad. I help get the kids ready for school, take care of that. And then when I clock in, I'm locked in, whether if it's at the office or working from home or working for one of the other locations that we have. What I have found that helps me best, because when I live in that proactive state and I can plan properly, I can execute. If I live in this reactive state of just whatever comes today and I have an hour here, let's see what happens, the procrastination sets in, the scatteredness sets in, things don't get accomplished. So I make it a point to plan on a weekly basis on Sundays. I look at my calendar every night before I go to bed, and then I'm adapting and just preparing myself mentally in the mornings with the targets and things that I want to get accomplished by prioritizing 3 or 4 things that are non-negotiables.
It's interesting that one of the core modules of my Invest in Your Leaders course is the time management module, and I get into priority management and time blocking. And I'm kind of dumbfounded at the number of people that don't do that and don't actually think through how to prioritize their day. Because Parkinson's law says that work expands to fill the space that we give it, right? The more time that we give everything, the busier we get. And all of a sudden we're working 60-hour weeks, but we're not getting much done. One of the things that happens in an entrepreneurial organization is the CEO tends to have a ton of ideas, and our job is to say no or not now to the CEO. Do you have any thoughts or systems that you use to be able to help save the CEO from themselves when they have all the quick ideas that they want to drop onto your plate?
That's really funny because we have a little inside joke here at Southeastern Tank. We have different divisions. It's all by SET. And our inside joke is the president's going to come up with something else, and we're going to call it by SET, because we do all sorts of because he's constantly throwing all these ideas at us, right? But we have a very open dialogue with one another. I think that's the great thing about the relationship that I have with my COO, is that if I don't feel right or I don't feel ready for something, I can go to him and he'll take that feedback. And more times than not, he'll be like, you know what, we're right, we're doing this too soon, because he is the visionary, and he has some great ideas, and he has some great ideas that we just can't accomplish right now. And so again, I think it's important to have those sit downs, those one-on-ones. We'll travel together for some time because we'll be able to incorporate dinners and lunches together to get a little bit more granular than we do with our weekly executive team calls. I think that's ultimately important, is to set aside time outside of your normal call setting with your COO, is have some just one-on-one time, whether if it's a dinner or it's having coffee or whatever the case may be, to really get to the heart of some of these things, generate that understanding of where we are and where we're going. And ultimately, you can't do it all at the same time, right? Let's get really good at this before we move on to that next shiny object.
Totally. I love that. Yeah, I talk a lot about that in my newest book, The Second in Command, as well, where we have to have systems in place. And I love that you talk about the one-on-one time, because you really do need to have those no or not now discussions away from the rest of the team. You can't do it with the whole leadership team in the room. All right, I want you to go back to the 22-year-old Stephen and give yourself some advice. What would you tell the 21 or 22-year-old Stephen Whitehouse just starting off on his career? Advice that maybe you know to be true today, but you wish you'd known then.
I've been asked that question, and it goes back to some of that imposter syndrome. It's, hey, you're good enough. And don't worry about the doubt and everything else that may be creeping into your mind, and whatever your childhood was, that's in the past, right? But you're good enough. And really, if you'll commit to something and you jump in both feet, it's going to work out for you at the end of the day. I'm a firm believer in that hard work and commitment to whatever it is, that's what gets you from not knowing what the hell is going on to, I'm pretty good at this now. And everything that I've ever done in my life, when I've committed to it and I've worked hard at it, it's worked out. And that would be ultimately what I tell my younger self. Because as I told you before, there's many things that I skipped on and passed on in my younger years. They would have worked out if I'd have just jumped in.
Well, we know it's working out. You've been a great member of the COO Alliance. And Stephen Whitehouse, Director of Operations for Southeastern Tank, thanks for sharing with us on the Second in Command podcast.
Yeah, Cam, I appreciate you having me. And I would encourage anybody that's kind of in the same role as me. You will not be disappointed if you get into the COO Alliance. It's a great community with a lot of like-minded individuals, with a lot of great resources and a lot of cool events as well. So, Cam, thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. We'll see you at the next one.
So it's hard at times and you can fall out of routine. But what I like to do is at least say, okay, I'll try and do a few things and then I'll give myself a break and I'll try better tomorrow. So for everybody who's listening, I think it's about progress. You know, as Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach always said, it's about progress, not perfection. How can you get just a little bit